So everyone, we are back. We are back on IG, on our IG lives, and we are talking about all things ADHD and all things ADHD and work and just life. This is week 4. I am in a new location, and um, I'm clearly struggling with where I'm putting my phone during this conversation today. But for those that are joining us, we are going to be talking today about all things ADHD and getting through graduate school and and the challenges that can come with doing a professional degree with ADHD. Right, you made it through undergrad, and now you're ready to make that next step. So we're going to be talking about some of the challenges and the experiences that you may have during that next phase in your life. So we have Sudhita here today. And did I pronounce your name right? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you cut out for a second, but I think we're back again.
Okay. I'm wondering if I should go back to my old location too. But we have Sudhita here today. That's how I pronounce your name correctly, right?
Yeah, Sudhita. It's like S-U, Old English D, Sudhita.
Oh,
So.
Sudhita. I like that. That's pretty. That's pretty. I like that. And she is an ADHD. Actually, I'm gonna have her introduce herself.
I'm Sudhita Kasturi. I'm a certified ADHD coach. I'm based in Northern Virginia, right outside of DC. And I work with professionals. Adult professionals is my niche. And one specialized niche I have is working with graduate students, professional students who are taking boards, and physicians and attorneys. So
Nice. Thank you. Thank you for doing this work. That's for sure.
well, thank you for hosting.
Thanks. Yeah. So we've been talking about all things, and so this was one of those areas where people kept coming to me and asking me some questions about, or some of the challenges that they're having just going through school. Um, I'm actually working with a bunch of undergrads now, actually, like people that are entering undergrad, but as an adult, older adult, and trying to get through college and the challenges of just trying to balance. Because at that point, like by the time you're in grad school, most people are older, they have a family, they're maybe navigating work at the same time, and they have this extra stressor that is now a part of their world. So, being able to have some additional support in working in those particular areas is key. What are some common challenges that you see come up for adults in that space?
Well, I think one of the things that I have a lot of conversations around is when you're coming back, right? You haven't been in school for a while. You have a goal and you have drive and life. Like you said, most of us have some sort of responsibilities. It wasn't like when we were in high school or and so then this presents new challenges because if you to retune your mind into being back at school and the rhythm of school while maybe having a family, work, and everything else. So that biggest thing that I've seen is retuning. That's there for neurotypicals or neurodivergence. And then for us, we've got the added challenge of our brain works so differently that everything, any handout that the school gives you of, do this to come back to when you come back to grad school is a meaningless document for all of us. So
Right. Yeah, that balance and trying to navigate this new stressor, because we all have lives, like we have real lives and real bills, real responsibilities in our life at that particular point. And so now we're adding this stressor here and trying to navigate. And it's just, adult learning is also different than learning when you're younger, right? So you're just experiencing a new hard for you.
you are.
I'm just pinning the welcome everybody that is just joining us. We are talking about thriving through graduate school with ADHD. And please feel free to, if you have questions, go ahead and just put them in the chat. We will read them and we'll get to them throughout our conversation, okay? And also, welcome to week 4. Um, so, what would you say are some of the solutions to some of these challenges?
Well, I think the first thing I'd like to say is if somebody as an adult is going back to school, right, there's a clear reason why we're going back to school.
Mm-hmm.
So that can really aid us because now we have context. We're not doing school because we're expected to do school, right? Go to high school, go to college because that's what we've been told as a way to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
So if you keep that as the big picture and as the context of why you're there,
Mm-hmm.
then and the ADHD brain is wired for context, right? When we know why we're doing things, it's much easier for us to actually engage, connect,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
to do what we need to do. So I think that's the huge plus of somebody who is going back to school as an adult or even in a graduate program. Most of us don't just roll into a graduate program. It's an intentional choice that we've made
Yeah.
to get an advanced degree. So that those are the pluses. Challenges, like I said, we're learning as adults,
Mm-hmm.
so that's a different navigation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Life is there, so carving out that time for ourselves where we can focus and not be concerned about dinner or work emails or whatever else is there in our life. um, that is a difficult thing to do. So, and also finding those times of focus. The only time that I may have maybe 8 p.m. in the middle of the week. Well, 8 p.m. I'm done, right? That is not my high focus time.
Yeah, yeah. That's such a good point because the reality is like you're now trying to work in the time that you have, which is not necessarily the time of day that you can be the most productive.
Yeah.
And so, how do you work and get things done in a time when it could be like your least productive window of the day,
Yep.
but that's the only time that you have available because
Yep.
maybe everybody's asleep at that particular point. All of your adult life responsibilities are done. Nobody's pulling on your shirts to ask you for something.
Yeah.
Nobody's texting you to ask you for something.
Uh-huh.
And so now it's your quote unquote free time, and now you need to get all this work done, and your brain is fried.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And your
Absolutely.
ADHD brain is saying, that bed looks so nice.
That bed looks so nice, or some sort of escape into a space where my brain can calm down, right? I don't have 100 thoughts running through my head. So you're
Mm-hmm.
looking for whatever your wind down is at the end of the day. And that's different for different people
Mm-hmm.
and how they do that. There are pluses, though, for and ways to navigate this, which is, I think, probably where you're headed next. So,
Yeah, there are ways to navigate it for sure. But just to stay with this other topic for a second, like thinking about like I think that's one major challenge for sure. Is really trying to figure out how to work within a time period that I mean I feel this now. Like I'm
yeah.
feeling this now as an entrepreneur. Like I'm not in school, but I'm an entrepreneur trying to get things done and recognizing my windows are during nap time with my
Mm-hmm.
1 year olds or when he goes to bed, and
Mm-hmm.
those are not my most functional times.
Yeah.
His nap time is the time that I have told everybody. When I was working in regular 9 to 5, I said, don't talk to me between 2 and 3 because that is the time where I'm not going to be able to function.
Uh-huh.
But now I have learned that I need to function between 2 and 3, and I don't want to.
Yeah. And typically, most of us around 2 or 3 are noticing that dopamine
Yep.
dip in the day before it goes right back. It starts creeping back up again.
Mhm.
And for me, my ideal time in the day is like 10 to noon or 1 is where I am the most focused, or 9 in the morning, right?
Yep.
But that's when I'm typically seeing clients. And because that's what works best for my clients. So
Yep.
then I'd love to study at 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. I'm taking an advanced coaching essentials class right now. And
Yeah.
my focus time is given to my clients. So now, how do I work that in?
Mhm.
And then also all these pieces that come, right? There are readings. If you're in class, then there's readings before class you have to do. There are probably, depending on how your program is structured, there are discussion posts
Yep.
that have to be done, homework that has to be dealt with. And for if you're in like a PhD program or something like that, you're probably doing research in a lab. And when I was doing research, my background is in chemistry and molecular biology. When I was doing research, the ideas just came so easily to me, right?
Mhm.
But then taking them and executing them, and especially if you're like in a scientific
Yep.
background environment, you're probably, if you're refining like a protocol or something like that, you're probably doing the same thing again and again to
Mhm.
get the results you want. And that is very boring to the ADHD brain,
Yep.
right?
And sometimes
And
the writing too.
the
Sometimes,
writing.
like sometimes.
So some of the people I work with is they've done the research, they've finished the classes, they've done the research, and now comes that huge thing of you got to write your dissertation. And even the defending part may not be the difficult part of it,
Mhm.
right? But it's the writing part of it. Or if you're in some kind of a master's or a master's of philosophy, you may have a thesis that you have to write.
Yeah.
So all of those, and then also comes up a lot of my graduate students are, they're expected to go to conferences, they're expected to have posters, or they're doing sessions and they're writing journal articles. Because
Yep.
if you are going to be in a research or an advanced degree in a graduate program
Yeah.
headed to academia, that's what you're going to be doing. So challenges.
Yeah. There's so many challenges, and just also thinking about the sometimes planning and prioritization can be a weaker executive function for the ADHD brain, right? And so now we have all of this really great research, and hopefully we didn't do a rabbit hole, right? And we
Mm-hmm,
actually were be able to sustain our attention when we're
mm-hmm,
reading that actual research article, and didn't go like 10 research articles deep. And we originally started to do some philosophical topic, and now we're looking at like why rabbits don't
mm-hmm.
like like the physiology of a rabbit, right? And so because we've gone down this literally rabbit hole,
Yeah.
um, and now we have all this content, all this information, especially if you're doing some type of doctorate or some thesis or some dissertation of some sort. Now you have to then synthesize all the information that you have collected
Yeah.
and then simplify it and put it within this document. And just the process of being able to do that can be really difficult.
Really difficult. And I'll also tell you one of the things when I used to teach high school students in the homeschool community. And when I was homeschooling my own children, it's documentation,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you could even have done the research and answer the questions, but did you document your data and your findings in any manner that when you go back to it and look at it, it makes sense,
Right.
right? Or is it some scribble that you wrote somewhere and maybe it's on a notepad somewhere or a sticky note somewhere? And now, how do you cull all that data together to write your thesis or
Yeah.
defend your thesis? Or so there's a lot that's there. On the
Yeah.
other hand, I will tell you, we know so many people who have advanced degrees and PhDs, including in my family, with ADHD
Yeah.
and who have succeeded.
Yeah.
So it
You
can be
can get
done.
it can be done. You can get through it. One other thing before I forget that was I know it was a challenge for me, going through my master's program is like you read so many, like just what you're talking about, like in terms of organization documenting things, like you read so much information and then now you're coming to write, and now you know it, but then you don't remember where it came from. And so then now you have to go back and find where it came from so that you can make sure that you cite it correctly, so then like you don't get in trouble for plagiarism. And then when I tell you, my papers would be great, and then I would get points taken off because I did the MLA or APA format incorrectly every single time. And at some point, I just told my professor, I said, listen, this formatting, like for whatever reason, I can't do it.
Yeah.
Like I can't do it. I'm not following the directions. It is what it is. Like I'm missing that particular detail. And so it will be wrong. And just mark me off because I don't care
Yeah.
anymore. I was like, because when I'm publishing or when I'm doing something else, this will be checked by somebody else.
Yeah.
Like somebody else will check this, and this isn't. I've decided that this isn't a skill that I need to know how to do
Yeah.
right now at this point in my life. And so she just kind of looked at me, but I was like, listen, I was like, it is what it is. Is the rest of the paper okay? Is things cited correctly in the paper? That's all that I need. That's all I care about. This little bibliography, I don't care.
And
Somebody else can do this.
that's something, the point that you bring is knowing where our strengths are and where they're not. And we can't you can't walk away, but then maybe you find that methodology of saying this is what needs to happen. So coming back to your point of what you were saying about the bibliography, right?
Yeah.
Figuring that those areas where it's just not gonna work for you, and what is the support that you can get within the confines of what is not ending up into any kind of honor code violations with the university or
Right.
whatever else there is now. And so those are the things that, and I think sometimes when you're older or when you're coming back to school, and if
Mhm.
you have navigated this journey with your ADHD and you have compensatory mechanisms or you have put in systems, you can actually lean on those systems. Say, hey, I know that this doesn't work for me, or I know this works for me. Now, how do I take this knowledge that I have from work, home, personal life, whatever it is, and how do I extend that knowledge and bring that knowledge into what I'm doing now
Mhm.
and bring those skills in here? Because over time, we all know, with or without knowledge of actually whether we know whether we've been diagnosed with ADHD, we've put
Mhm.
in systems and methods that work for us, right?
Mhm.
I had systems before I ever knew that I had ADHD. And then as I studied it, I went, oh, now I know why that works, right?
Right. Or I know why this didn't work.
Or why
Or
it didn't work, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
because I definitely, when I was in grad school, I definitely did not know that I had ADHD. But when I go back and look at pictures of me studying, that my friends took of me, wow, because they thought it was
mhm,
hilarious, it has ADHD written all over
yeah,
it.
yeah. Well, one reason I didn't finish graduate school was because of those challenges, right? And I keep thinking, oh, if I had had the knowledge I have now, what would that journey have looked like for
Mhm.
me? But then I went back and trained as a coach,
Mhm.
I think I joined school right after I turned 50. And but I had worked with students, I'd worked with my own children, I understood a lot more. So going through a coaching program, it was an intense 1 year program, right?
Mhm.
With a specialization in ADHD, I could bring a lot of that in for me and say, "Oh, I know this works. I know this doesn't work. This is how you navigate this
Mhm.
at this point of time." So, and this was over all my professional career, being an entrepreneur, being program manager, all of that stuff
Yep.
that I had accumulated, this knowledge, this skill, and all of that, and said, how do we bring this and how do we leverage this at this point of time? So,
Yeah, and what I tell my clients all the time too, it's like you have to be aware of how your brain works, and you have to accept it, because once you do those two things, then you can start to put the pieces in
yeah.
place that are going to be helpful for you.
Yeah. Yeah. My mentor, Cameron Gott, he always talks about, there's awareness and understanding.
Yep.
And then how do we engage with this understanding and awareness that we have
Mhm.
to take ourselves to completion?
Yep.
Because ultimately it's completion, whatever it is, whether it's getting the dishes done every night or every other night, or graduating from graduate school, or writing your thesis, or publishing a research paper. everything is awareness, understanding how am I engaging with that, and then how do
Mm-hmm.
I take it to completion, whatever your completion is.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, there are tools that will help you with that. But like you said, Megan, it's first that, because ADHD, we're not all about our ADHD, but it is a huge part of us.
Mm-hmm.
And we navigate the world differently. We look at the world differently, and we live in a world that's not designed for us.
Yep.
So then, how do I carve out that path and that methodology that works for me? And it will not look like anybody else's methodology, process, whatever. So, the biggest thing I tell people is own it. Own the fact that
Yeah.
this is you, and it doesn't matter what the world says. If Reader's Digest tells you to do something some way, that's fine, unless it says it's for neurodivergent brain.
Right.
You know?
Exactly. And that's the thing, like most advice is not coming from that perspective. And so
Yeah,
people will give you all these business books, people will give you all these like graduate school books, and it's like if you're not including some language around neurodiversity, then I don't like
yeah.
it's hard to take that stuff into consideration. Um, because you weren't taken into consideration when it was written. And so it is very important to, I mean, if that's one tip, right? So like if you're trying to take advice from anybody around getting through graduate school, ask them like how much do you know about the brain? How much do you know about ADHD and some of the challenges that I'm actually experiencing, so that your tools and your suggestions are tailored to me.
Yeah. And that's actually the frustration that a lot of people have, because they'll say, "Oh, a coach can help you with this." Absolutely,
Mm-hmm.
provided the coach understands how the ADHD brain works, because otherwise it's a frustrating process for them and it's a
Mm-hmm.
frustrating process for you. And then you've racked up one more check mark in the this did not work for me, or I failed at this,
Yep.
when the coach was supposed to get me from point A to point B. And because the essential piece of that ADHD is missing
Mm-hmm.
in that, right? When I coach people, it's educating around that ADHD and saying, this is
Yeah.
how your brain works. And this is how I advocate for myself. I don't always go out and say, I have ADHD. I said, this is what works for me. This
Yeah.
is how I do things. This is the way I navigate this.
Yep.
And I will adjust according to somebody else's thing, but I will speak for myself and say, I no longer feel diminished
Mm-hmm.
because my brain works different. It's different. It's not better. It's not broken. It's
Yep.
just different.
It's just different. And and I always try to explain to people too, like everybody has a brain. We all do, like or else we wouldn't be on this earth, right? And everybody's brain functions differently, literally everybody. And so do you know how you function, and is the world around you with the program designed for you? Like, and I would argue that most the way that the collegial system is designed, it is not always designed with the neurodiverse brain in mind,
No.
um,
And I'll
in
tell
a
you, a
lot of
lot of
ways.
the even the ADHD coaching programs, a lot of them, right?
That part.
That sometimes that's challenging, because this is the other thing, right? Just because there are 20 of us in a class who have ADHD doesn't mean all of us take in information the same way and process information the same way. I, from a very young age, my mom is a scientist. I have read her research, her journal articles. I would edit, and I did that. So for me to pull something off and read a research article or a publication from a journal is
Hmm.
not difficult, because I've been doing it for so many years.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily true for everybody else, right? Now, for me, when people give too many graphics, that's very, very hard for me to connect all that information.
Hmm.
I actually need to read it and parse through it. Now, one of the things I do is I actually print stuff, or I know one of my sons does this. He does everything on a tablet.
Yeah.
But you need to mark up the stuff. I have to mark it up. I have to highlight it. I take notes in the column. If there are 5 attributes of ADHD that I'm supposed to know, I go in and number it. So if you ask me on a test, what are the attributes of ADHD? And I am like, okay, I have 4 down, but I remember from my notes I wrote 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's a 5th one I'm missing somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Um, a lot of times for students, if they're getting the books from the school, they're not allowed to mark it up, right?
Yeah.
And so a
Or
lot of
the
times I
library.
go,
Yeah.
or the library, can you buy those books? They're not always cheap.
I mean, they're like
They're
never
very
cheap.
expensive. Yeah, especially textbooks are very expensive. But is there a way, can there be dollars, or is there a way to maybe, I don't know. Like for a lot of the material, the classes I take, it's material that they made available that I can just print out and I do it. And sometimes I've made copies from books and used
Yeah.
it for personal use. So
Yeah, so you need to develop study habits that are going to work for you in order to be able to
yeah,
retain the content and the information.
yeah.
Because we do have working memory challenges too. So like if you're also trying to read, but there's 50 million different distractions going on at the time, like are you really reading it? Because sometimes you read the information but not really read it, and so like your eyes are moving.
Well, and that brings down to the all the distractions. One of the things that I have a strict rule about is notifications. All notifications have to be turned off, right? And
Hmm.
I don't have email notifications and all of that anyway that come to my phone because I know I will go check my email, right?
Yep.
The only place I have is text messages, and even that when I'm working with clients or I'm studying, those are all off. And for my family, I use an iPhone, so I don't know if anybody, I don't know how it works on an Android, but I have it set up that my family is on what they call emergency bypass. So if they call me, I know that something big is going on and I need to give my attention to that because if they're texting, I'm not paying attention. So if anybody in my family calls me during my workday or when I have it marked on my calendar that I'm studying, then I know it's something that needs my immediate attention. But otherwise, if my phone is going ding, ding, ding all the time from Facebook, Instagram, email, text messages, WhatsApp, there is no way for my brain to engage with what I'm doing
Yeah.
at that point in time, right?
Yeah.
So, what is it? How do, how can you create that window of time for yourself where everything it's just
Yeah.
that you are doing? And then going to your point about reading, sometimes you have to get the information in many different ways. I do really
Hmm.
well when I'm listening and
Hmm.
I have the reading material with me, right? I and again in that if it's like graphics, too many graphics, it's hard for me to work with that
Yeah.
one. And I'm also not one, so like a lot of people, the kinesthetic learners, the people who need to manipulate things, I'm not that fabulous with that. So like machinery, like one of the classes I struggled with in grad school was instrumentation and instrument
Hmm.
analysis because there was a lot of that physical manipulation of things, and that was very, very difficult
Yeah.
um, for me. That learning that came from that.
Yeah, so you need to know. So like, there are e-readers that can read the content that
Hmm.
you're reading on the computer. There's also like there's new apps out there too around like if you do have a PDF, you can still highlight and take notes in there. There's pens that you can also scan documents and
Hmm.
scan the content that you're reading so that you can hear it later or be able to save important like sentences or parts of it so that you can kind of take a note of that later. And there's also a lot of like if there's a concept that you're really not understanding and you're not getting it through text. I mean, there's a lot of YouTube videos about a lot of things, and so
Yes.
a lot of things. And so if there is a particular context, you're like, you know what? Like I went to class, I didn't get it. I have this textbook, I didn't get it. I'm reading this content, I'm not getting it. And so if a YouTube video is helpful, then access a YouTube video. And so like for example, like this is just for me, like I identify as being Christian, right? And so I've been trying to read the Bible, like
Hmm.
it's hard, right? And so it's hard, I can't get through it. But somebody created like all these cartoons and like it's like cartoon figures, and it's just so much easier for me to understand and to follow the different stories. And I'm like, oh my God, let me just go ahead and go to YouTube for this. And so just thinking about like right now, like going through graduate school is very different today than it was 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago, right? So you have
Absolutely.
access to so many more tools that can help you and help your ADHD brain get through graduate school. Like y'all are lucky, like if you're going through graduate school now versus like when
Yeah.
I did.
Well, the and to that point, like one of the things I do is I listen to podcasts around concepts that are difficult for me to understand. And because I kind of, especially if I have a background on it, I
Uh-huh.
speed it up. I'm listening to it at 1.5 or 2
Exactly.
because just having that information is enough. Like I need to get the breadth of it. I'm not looking for details because I'm trying to grasp a concept or understand more about something. I was listening to a podcast recently that was about 2.5 hours long on trauma and ADHD and how the symptoms can mimic each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was making a presentation, so I needed bits and pieces from that. I didn't need to understand every detail. I wasn't going to be taking a test on it. This was 2 hours and 45 minutes of a podcast that I listened to on double speed so that
Yeah.
I could actually get through it
Right.
and get the concept. And where I needed it, I paused it and took the information down. And I also used like transcripts because a lot of podcasts will have transcripts. A lot of times I can read the transcript a lot faster than I can listen to something.
Right.
So again, it's how you're getting the information that you need.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the focus time. So one of the things we've done is leveraging those focus times. And if you can't leverage it during the week because you're working on the weekend, if my focus time is 9 to 1, then can I block off on my off day, whatever it is, if it's not a weekend, whatever my off day is, from
Mm-hmm.
9 to 1, can I block that time off on a Saturday or a Sunday? Say no to social commitments and say, this is the time I'm going to study, right? This is
Yeah.
the time I'm going to make for myself and do that. And if that means that you suppose Saturday and Sunday is your lunch responsibility that day, to make lunch, can you have somebody
Yeah.
else in the house do it, or can you prep or prepare something early before you sit down and do it? It's finding those uninterrupted blocks of times, because sometimes to
You're still here. I can't. We can't hear you though. Did you go on? Oh, there you go.
what happened. So um um to slide into the mode takes time, right? So I need to
Mm-hmm.
have designated blocks. Other thing I do on my calendar, I will put that 9 to 11 or 9 to 12. I will put a study block and I will label it with what I want to study. Because otherwise I sit there and I go, oh,
Oh, I don't even know
what
where
am
to
I
start.
supposed to do? Right? I have a study block. Suppose I'm taking 3 classes or 2 or 3 classes as a graduate student.
Mm-hmm.
Which one am I supposed to study? Right? Am I doing genetics? Am I doing cell biology?
Right.
What am I doing? So unless the time is blocked with that saying that, more than
Yeah.
likely some of that time block will get wasted
Yep. Because you're
while I
trying to. Yeah.
figure out what to do.
Yep. One of the other things that I do that's helpful to kind of get myself like motivated, like into the mood of doing work again, especially when the time block that I have available is not my most productive time period. I
Mhm.
have to now trick my brain into being a productive time period. So one that's paying attention to what I'm eating, what I'm drinking also. And so if I know that I need to use 6 to 9, which is the time that I just kind of usually want to wind down, but now I need to use 6 to 9 to be working. That means that day or before that, like I'm not eating a super heavy dinner because those things are going to drain me. Like I know how my body reacts to certain carbohydrates, right? And so like now I need to make sure that I'm eating and drinking energizing things.
And that goes for test taking also, right? I work with a lot of physicians who have to take their boards. It's
Mhm.
an it's an 8 hour, and even I think there's step one, step two. It's like an 8 hours of testing and a 1 hour break in over the course of the day. So if
Oof.
you don't plan it out, especially because we have issues with time, if I take
Mhm.
a 30-minute break between my first and second block or whatever, then I have 30 minutes for the rest of the day. So how do I budget those times of
Mhm.
when I'm taking breaks? What am I eating and drinking?
Mhm.
Sometimes you have to adjust like medications. I have clients who have to adjust when they take. Do they take a bump up dose of and medication in of itself is not under coaching, but medication management of how they're working with their attention and focus, that's something that we can work on. if
Yeah.
you have to go somewhere to take a test, right? If you have to go to a test center,
Yep.
how long is it going to take you to drive it? Do you need to drive it the day before or 2 days before to see where are you going to park?
Mm-hmm.
Right? What is the process? I have clients who've checked into hotels which are close to their testing center, even though they're in the same city, but navigating 45 minutes or 50 minutes of traffic, especially like we're in the DC metro area,
Oh yeah.
10 miles or 5 miles means absolutely nothing to us. Like, I mean,
Right.
it 5 miles could be 35 minutes or 5 miles could be 15 minutes. We don't know.
Right.
So they've checked into hotels. Now, all of this requires planning and a lot of intentional thinking around that. And like
Mm-hmm.
you said, awareness of how you may get tripped up
Mm-hmm.
by your own brain and how you engage with the learning process or what you do.
Mm-hmm.
One other one that has worked really well is kind of, everybody talks about the reverse of the Pomodoro method, right? You
Mm-hmm.
work for 20 or 25 minutes and then you take a 5 minute break or whatever. Well, what if you were to work for 5 minutes and take a 10 or 15-minute break? You have to be disciplined about that. And then you do that. Usually by the second time you do it, you're in the zone and you're not
Mm-hmm.
doing it anymore. But sometimes for people, it's like, oh my gosh, I got to study for 25 minutes before I get a 5 minute break. Flip the equation.
Yep.
Flip it. Start with five, take a 15, 20-minute break, do another 5, 15, 20. I guarantee usually by the third block, you're in a flow and you're going, right?
Yep.
So these are things that, I mean, again, it comes back to understanding what is the goal. And another big thing is keeping your goal in front of you. Why are you doing what you're doing? With all our memory recall issues, sometimes you sit there and go, we don't even know why. What is the big purpose? Why am I in grad school? Why is passing the bar important to me? Why, okay, I went to school for nursing, but why do I care to pass the nursing boards, right?
Right.
What does it mean
Yeah.
to do that? Why am I doing that? So put that in front of you everywhere of what
Yep.
it is, of what your goal is. So,
Yeah, I just was talking to a client yesterday actually too, and that she's getting a degree in education,
mhm,
and it's like what is why? Like
mhm,
why are you getting a degree in education? What is the purpose? What is the goal? What is the motivating factor for you to pursue this?
mhm,
And undergrad and graduate school is a little different, obviously, because one, like graduate school is definitely way more specific about what it is that you're doing for your professional career versus undergrad can kind of be all over the place. Um, but you do have by the time you get to grad school, like we talked in the beginning, you have a stronger why.
mhm.
And it is like keeping that vision. Put it on your computer, make a sticker, and stick it to the back of your computer, to the front of your computer, so you can constantly remember what your why is. Somebody had asked a question around other than accommodation in the classroom, what other support is available in college?
Um, I think that's a really good question. There are a lot of, so one of the things I realized is at the college level, there are a lot more accommodations of it. Like the a lot of the disabilities offices and things like that are very willing to work with you on what you need,
Mhm.
though advocating for those things is the onus is on the student, not so much. They're not going to come to you and say, hey, did you get this? They will set it up. Now you work it out with your professors of how that's going to look. You need to sit in the front of the classroom. You need
Yeah.
quiet testing. All of that is something. Now your professors or may not, you do not need to disclose why you have accommodations, but you can say, these are my accommodations. How is this going to look like in your classroom? Because some
Yeah.
professors say, no, I want you to take the test in our in an office space in here with a TA supervising it. Some will say, oh, we'll send it to disabilities office and you take the test over there. So, and like text to speech. The other thing I have a lot of
Yeah.
students do, I have a lot of medical students that I work with, is taking pictures, sometimes because a lot of professors may not share what their notes are, or they may not have prepared slideshows of that. I have a student who's taking organic chemistry right now,
Mhm.
organic chemistry too, is working it out that you can take pictures of what they're, um, whatever they're putting up on the whiteboard, or that is. You
Yeah.
can get note takers to do that. You can get text to speech, converters. You can get recordings, even if a professor does not allow for that. I have a student who has their auditory processing is at like 25%. So that means they're only processing a fourth of what is coming through to them, right?
Yeah.
So they need to listen to their lectures again. And they're in a class where the professor doesn't allow that, but they have this accommodation. So
Right.
now they get a recording, they can make it themselves or the professor will make it. Those are all details that can be worked out. But
Yeah.
there are, yeah,
And the professor doesn't determine what your accommodation is.
no.
And so there's another office for that.
Yeah, there's a
Um,
disabilities accessibility office, and at most schools, I've had schools where, one of the areas I work with is students who are on academic probation, college
mhm.
students, right? And sadly, sometimes it's not because the student hasn't advocated for themselves; is the school itself is not supportive of
Yeah.
whatever your need is, and especially with ADHD, it's an invisible disability,
Mhm.
right? You and I walk through the world with nothing that people can see
I
that
see.
says
Yeah.
that I am working with whatever difference
Mhm.
in my neurochemistry. And that's where the diagnosis piece is very important, because you need to have a formal diagnosis. I cannot walk into a disabilities office and say, hey, I took a I think I have ADHD, give me
Yeah.
accommodations.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. You have to have that. And then there's barriers to that. And that's a whole different conversation altogether.
Yeah. But it's accessible. I mean, it's supposed to be accessible. You should have it. Every university has a disabilities office. Um, and also the other thing too is like if you are in graduate school, just know that one, you can access accommodations. So under the American Disabilities Act, you can access accommodations as a student. But if you're working at the university or you're working somewhere else, you can also ask for accommodations in the workplace.
Yeah.
And so if you're working at the university and taking classes at the university, then you can get it from, it's just two different offices though. And so it's two different offices, and you need to just make sure that you can access it through both.
Yeah.
And those accommodations are going to look different because you're doing different
Yeah.
work.
Because
Um,
reasonable accommodations at work
yeah,
are very different than whatever your academic accommodations will be at school.
yeah,
And most schools that we work with, the people in the accessibility offices are really, really good at
hmm
what they do. They understand, and they're there to support the students, right?
yeah,
There's also a lot of them will have like tutoring that you can get depending on what your program is, and some of it is free, and there's ways to access all of that. It does require, and this is, I think, where the challenge comes, right? In order to access these services and to do these, it requires executive function, and that is where our challenges are.
hmm
So you're asking us in order to support our journey, we
hmm
need the support we need comes in the areas the area of my brain that I need to employ to get that is
right,
the one that I have struggles with. And
right,
then if I get upset about things, or if I am having a rough day emotionally, those executive functions are even more inaccessible to me.
hmm
There's a veil there, right? And so now whatever it is that I'm trying to accomplish becomes that much more difficult.
yep. And that's why I would argue that universities do need to do a better job of taking their like responsibility for making sure that their students are successful. And on top of it, they're paying you. So I feel like we're their customer, and I feel like you should be doing everything that you need to do in order to support your customer. So I would always argue that universities also need to be more proactive,
Yeah.
um, and ensure that these professors are actually implementing these
Yeah.
accommodations as well, and monitor them and hold them accountable. Like I feel like there's a lack of accountability that's happening on the university end, um, which is unfortunate. And so that's why we're telling you, like, you need to be able to be a strong self advocate and recognize during those moments where you are not able to access those self advocacy executive functions, are the ones that are required for self advocacy, then being able to seek, like, have other people in your corner too, and building those relationships even at the university, and so that people recognize that you're not always going to be able to help yourself, but they're in a position to be able to to be able to advocate on your behalf as well, because like university, I mean, we're pay- and
Yeah,
this is just me
yeah,
getting on my horse. But we're paying way too much money
yeah.
to these universities and for these programs for them to position you to
Yeah.
fail.
And this is the thing, right? Um, One of the challenges I had in grad school was when I was at the receiving end of some of this stuff where I was not getting the support, right?
Mhm.
The university chose to side with the professor versus with me because that was a professor who brought in a lot of research dollars versus the graduate student. On the other hand, when I was in undergrad, part of the reason I was successful was because I had somebody in the administrative department, including and my advisor, who both went, oh, how do we support you, what can we do for you?
Mhm.
So there are the people there,
Yeah.
and there
Yeah.
are the people who will not be helpful. And how do you navigate those journeys? And yes, universities need to be doing more. And there's research being done at Hopkins and all of that, and um, of how to normalize or have some kind of standard of what you're receiving at every university, because it varies. And
It
sometimes
varies
the
widely.
community college can be a really, really good option because sometimes they're smaller and they're more student focused than a huge university. Um,
Yeah.
the choices we made for both my children to go to university were very different in the size of the university and the type of programs, because both of them needed very, very different things from that.
Yeah.
And what kind of support one needed or need is different from what the other one needed.
Yeah. Yeah. And so yeah, you have to be very clear about what type of program that you're going to go to too. And like, those are questions that you ask like during the admissions process, or when you're the search for a program that's going to work for you. It's part of it is also recognizing like what support services they have available at the university to help get you through the program. And when you think about professional schools, also people looking at rankings, right? And so especially like if you're in law school, like people looking at rankings, like there's a level of competition that comes into play when you're thinking about what school you're going into. Um, Also, and so if you're trying to get into one of these top 10 schools to help excel your career in a certain place, but then also you need some additional support, and maybe that top 10 school isn't giving you the right supports at the school. So then, okay, that's fine, but you just need to know that. And so then now what external resources are
Yeah.
you going to be accessing?
Do you get a ADHD coach to help you with that? Do you get
Mhm.
somebody who is a disability accessibility specialist who can advocate for you to get you the accommodations?
Mhm.
All of that, and that is resources both in time, energy, effort, and sometimes in terms of dollars also, right? Of what you can get. But again, the support is available and
Mhm.
access can be,
Iffy. Yeah.
depending on where you are, but it
Yeah.
is there. And sometimes it's a lot of it that onus lies on you. Also, I will say when you're taking things like your boards and that like like I had a client who was taking her board. She finished law school. There are preparatory packages or study packages you can get,
Mhm.
and we had to go in and do research and say which one was more ADHD friendly, right? So there were three or four choices, and out of one, when she went and did her research online, and we looked up some stuff, and I checked in with some other people who I knew who were attorneys and who were neurodivergent,
Mhm.
we found that there was this one particular program that was much better for the neurodivergent brain than others, and
Yeah.
also how her study process looked and how she prepped for this exam looked very different from her neurotypical classmates.
Mhm.
So one of the things we worked in coaching was not doing that comparison of how does it look. I have siblings who are neurotypical. How they study and prep and how I study and prep is very, very
Mhm.
different. And I just have to own my process and saying this is what works for me. And
Yep. And
as
one
if you,
isn't better than the other.
one isn't better than the other. And if you are a parent of somebody, then know that your neurodivergent child's process is going to look very very different. Your adult neurodivergent child's process is going to look very different. And if you have two, like I do, um, both of their processes look different. So, you can't say that, hey, this worked for your brother.
Yeah.
Why won't you
Yeah.
do it? I have one who needs music to study. I have one who says, if you play music, it doesn't matter what it is. All I'm listening to is the music and I don't know what I'm doing anymore.
Mhm.
Right. So, again, customize, knowing that there is no one formula and
Mhm.
listening to yourself or listening to the other person in your life and saying, what is it that works for you? And sometimes it's trying things and everything's a win,
Mhm.
right? If it works, yay. If it doesn't work, we know that now, hey,
Yeah.
this doesn't work. At least at
This
this
doesn't
point in
work.
time, this doesn't work.
Yeah. Everything is an opportunity to learn whether or not you're failing or succeeding, right? And so, yeah, with just, you just, you really need to make sure that you're paying attention to those things too.
Yeah. And
Taking note of this.
that growth
Mhm.
mindset of looking at that. And there are skills you can leverage, right? If there are two or three of you who are taking the same class, body double, work together, right?
Mhm.
And if you don't have somebody to do that in your class, there are apps for that you can sign up for a Zoom session with somebody. It doesn't really matter where they are, what they're doing, and you both sit and
Mhm.
do your work for that.
Yeah. Or go to a
So
coffee
there are,
shop.
yeah, there are two, or go to a coffee shop. So I move around the house as I coach every day, especially if there are some areas I can't work in because if there are other people in the household and the privacy and
Yeah.
confidentiality aspect is not, I have to honor that and I have to follow that. But when within those confines, there are places that I can move around because my brain works better if I just sit here at my
Mhm.
desk. It starts getting
Yeah.
stale. So
Yeah. Use a coffee shop. Body double. I used to go to coffee shops all the time and just feed off the energy of other people
yeah,
in order to get that done. But yeah, you can body double, and then on top of it, like especially if you're doing like an LSAT, like a LSAT prep or MCAT prep, or on the other end, once you finish, you're studying for boards or and to get your final degrees, right? Um, there's even if people are not in your program, there's still somebody that's still doing it somewhere. Like there are a million
absolutely.
people all over the world that are trying to take the LSAT, right? And so there's people all over that are trying to pass their boards at the end of their program. And so you can lean on. It doesn't necessarily have to be your current circle. It could be a circle that
Yeah.
you just found randomly on the internet. But again, this is what I'm saying. Like in 2024, when I was in grad school, there wasn't all of this access to all these materials and all these groups and all of these resources. So yeah, so just take advantage of those opportunities that you have available now. The other thing, the one little last point that I also sometimes tell my clients too is like, if you have the ability to use AI during lectures and allow AI to record the information for you, then to summarize some of the content, it can create study cards for you. It can create study notes for you.
Yeah.
It can do all types of stuff. Like if you're having a hard time understanding like what's important and what isn't important, let it do it for you, and then you can go ahead and consult your professor afterwards and say like, listen, these were my key takeaways. Is am I Are these the right
Yeah.
takeaways that I should be getting from this content? Are these takeaways going to help prepare me for the exam that you're going to be
And then
giving me
this is the
later?
thing, right? Leverage those office hours. The
Mhm.
professors are there. A lot of times, I remember as a graduate student, I was a TA for a organic chemistry lab. Most
Mhm.
people did not show up. So it was 1 hour, or I think I had 3 hours a week that I got paid for, where I sat and did my own studying at that point in time because nobody showed up,
Yeah,
right?
but people don't show up. I think people don't show up because they don't know what to show up for.
Yeah.
And so
So,
know, one of the things you can show up for is like to have somebody help you go through your notes, like what is actually important. Like, but you would see this in the workplace, right? Like you meet with your manager and be like, okay, this is my priorities for the week.
yeah,
Does this make sense?
yeah.
Same thing within grad school. Like these are the takeaways. These are the priorities that I think would help me move forward. Is this is this true or not? Like, am I moving in the right direction? Like, those are some of the questions that, like, I wish that I would have asked, and I did not. Like,
Yeah.
I did not ask any of these questions.
And so this is the thing. So I would go and I would ask, so especially, so one of the things I would do in the office hours is if I got stuff wrong on a test, I would go meet with them to try and understand why I got it wrong. This was not necessarily, a lot of times, sometimes I would end up getting extra points on it because, when we discussed it, they'd go, oh, I can kind of see that. But the goal was not that. The goal was saying, I got this wrong. Why did I get it wrong? What do I need to do differently? What is the learning in this? So the
Mhm.
next time when I'm navigating this or a similar problem or whatever, I have this information in my bucket. Because ultimately, why are we in school or why are we in graduate school? It's to learn,
Yeah.
to enhance our learning. And so if you take that viewpoint, right,
Mhm.
then it's a very, very different process you're navigating,
Mhm.
of saying, how do I improve? Because if I'm going to come in as a coach or as a doctor or whatever, that knowledge
Mhm.
is very important when I'm working with people. That's
Mhm.
why I went to school,
Yep.
right? Will your knowledge enhance as you work with people? Will you get better? Yes, but you need to know that stuff. So, taking the viewpoint of how do I enhance my learning? How do I increase the scope of my knowledge? How do I do this? It makes it a very, very different
Mhm.
process versus just looking at it as grades or, I have to do this to check off the box. Yes, there will be those pieces that we have to do,
Yeah.
but why are we doing them?
Yeah, but yeah, exactly. And so instead of feeling the shame and guilt for like getting something wrong, it's like, oh, okay, well, I got this wrong. Okay, well, now let me help. Let's figure out how I can get it right the next time, because this is a place of learning,
Exactly.
and not getting something right is expected. Like you're not expected to really get everything right all the time.
Yeah. And you were saying about AI. So one of the things, our brains are big brains. We're divergent thinkers. You give me a topic. Even when you and I talked about this topic, I think we talked for what, an hour or
Yeah.
something, and came out with like six bullet, like, we had to go from here and narrow the scope down and
Right.
converge our thinking, right? So typically when somebody will do this, when I ask, somebody's like, oh, can you make a presentation on women at work or whatever, right? My brain is going, oh my gosh, it's like this thing. I have leveraged AI for that, is to go
Mhm.
in and say, give me some bullet points on women at work or women with ADHD at work or whatever the things is. A lot of times the stuff is too generic or whatever,
Yeah.
but it gives me enough of a starting point to
Yep.
get my brain going. And you can, I put in, it's a 20-minute presentation, it's a 40-minute presentation. It will give me enough bullet points. And then I'm like, oh, this is junk, but this is
Yep.
valuable. And, to do that. So even in the stuff that you're doing, you can
Mhm.
use the tools, of course, keeping in mind things like
Right.
plagiarism and, all of that, being very watchful of that. I think, Megan, you said that, right? It's a whole different world. And I think even the post-pandemic world is very different.
Yeah.
Um, so so how do we make it all work for us? And how do we benefit from
Yep.
that?
Well, let's stop there because I feel like we could probably talk about this topic for like another 3 hours. Um, so I want to thank you for coming on my live and being participating in my awareness campaign that I'm doing for the month of October. Please, everybody that is listening, follow her on social media. It's it's
Leverage your
leverage
ADHD and
your ADHD.
yeah, more content coming. That's my 2025. We're in 2024, right? Yes.
Yes. But
uh,
reach out to her, send her a DM, and
yeah,
ask her about her services and what she provides. We are both here doing the good work, but we also can only see so many people at the same time, right? And so like this is like I can't see everybody, she can't see everybody, and so we have to also leverage our own network, our ADHD coaching network, to make sure that people are getting the right supports and it's the right coach for them,
exactly.
also. And so that's why, like, I have these coaches on here because I'm not the only coach in the world, people. And so, do I have programs? Yes. Do I have resources? Yes. But I also have a network of people that you can also access to. And so, I think that is
And we all have
important.
our niches, right? That
Right.
and specialty. And like you have a background in diversity, DEI that
Yeah.
I don't necessarily have. So I've referred people to
Mhm.
you, and I don't work with young children, right?
Right.
So then I have coaches that I send out or specialty. So yeah, and then being in the industry, we can direct you
Hmm.
towards other people. So, leverage us, I guess,
Yeah,
is.
leverage us too, to make sure that you're getting the supports that you need. A couple things that are coming up for me and just for the rest of the month is that so we have some additional conversations that are happening all the way until October 31st. So this is not the end. This week we do have we're going to be talking about being multi-passionate and what that looks like, and how the ADHD brain can be a good thing and sometimes it can be a bad thing having a lot of passions, right? And so we're going to be talking about that tomorrow. The time on Thursday is going to shift a little bit, so I'm still working that one out. But then on Friday we have a nutritionist coming in, and so we're going to be talking about ADHD and nutrition. Next week when we have a financial advisor coming in, we're going to be doing some exercises around regulating your nervous system, and then we also have somebody coming and talking about like resume writing when it comes to ADHD and what that could potentially look like. So there's still a lot of content that's coming. The replays are also coming too, I promise. I promise the replays are coming so that everybody can access this information that we've been sharing all month long. I do have a group coaching program. If you identify as a woman with ADHD, there is a group coaching session that is happening on Thursday at 8 o'clock. And then I am coming out with a Thrive coaching program membership that is going to be available soon as well. So be on my email list so that you can check out some information about that. But you'll have some access to some courses around executive functions, about work accommodations, about regulating your emotions. And so that information will be available for you as well. So thank you for listening to my mini commercial about what's coming up. And then, if you, Sudhita, if you have any programs that are coming up too, feel free to talk
Um,
about them right now.
Yeah, so I'll be launching a group coaching program in 2025, early 2025. This will be directed towards South Asians, and there will be one that will be based in the US for South Asians in the US, and then one that will be outside the US, probably based out of for people in South Asia,
Oh, I love that.
and that's especially because coaching there, well, there's a lower understanding of ADHD, and
Mm-hmm.
coaching, one-on-one coaching, is inaccessible
Yeah.
for most people. I also recommend for those of you who have an interest, access supports organizations like CHAD, the ADHD Coaches Organization,
Mm-hmm.
and the Adults with ADHD ADA that has, and they have support groups. I volunteer there as a facilitator for the South Asian Peer Support Group,
Yeah.
to do that. So there's a lot of, there are opportunities out there for you to get information, support. And right now, most of my work is one-on-one clients, adult professionals, and professionals who are taking boards or in grad school working on their PhDs, postdoctoral fellows, and all of that. So if you're interested in one-on-one coaching, I have a couple spots open. So
I love it. Take advantage, people. If you're listening, take advantage. We are here. Take advantage of us, whether or not that's going to be accessing our services directly or getting a resource or getting a recommendation. We are here for that. So connect with us on all of our different platforms. You can get access to all of our information on our pages. But thank you again for coming on board, and then I'll see everybody tomorrow.
yes, and thank you for having me, Megan. This was awesome.
Okay, thank you.
Bye
Have a good
bye.
night.